I'm in the studios here in London town. Mark's in a studio somewhere in Strasbourg. Do you have like a luxury studio, or are you in a kind of a broom cupboard?
I'm actually in a really lovely luxury studio in France Bleu, Alsace. And they're looking after me fantastically well.
Do you have beer and waffles and fries? Isn't that what everyone eats there? And chocolate?
I am definitely going out for a beer afterwards. And in fact, I'm very grateful to Simon, our producer, editor, whatever the word now is, for telling me that in French, Johnny Knock Me Down is Johnny Massume.
Yeah. Okay, I looked it up. That actually means Johnny Kiss Me, but okay, come on.
Oh, does it?
No.
Then why has he told me that? I see, he set me up.
He's trying to get you into trouble. So Jason Isaacs is here, so let's everybody all at once say hello to Jason. I just need to say, Jason, that there was a journey that I was doing from a train down south, coming up to London, couple of tubes onto a different train. And in the course of the tubey bit, I had 2 or 3 people who came up to me and they said the normal thing, it's just like the secret code. So they just came out and they said hello. And I said, that's very nice of you. Thank you. I'll pass it on. So for everybody who has said that to me, ever since the last time you were on the show, which was in 2016, I think, I'm passing it on. All these people say hello.
Do you know what I hear when people say hello to Jason Isaacs, as they do in some of the strangest places in the world? I love Mark and Simon's show. And I try not to throw up in their face. And I go, I love it too, but let's be quiet about it, shall we?
Someone sent us this, which is apparently in space. It was actually launched into space on a Voyager ship, and that's a clip.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing, and it's a disc, and it says hello to Jason Isaacs, and that's like the Earth.
You've penetrated the outer atmosphere.
That's what you have.
Well, me, as your convent.
So
it's nothing to do with me anymore. You realise it's
someone
code
Star
for
Trek,
I listen to that show.
Someone from Star Trek, your show, would stumble upon that and go, oh.
I've met bunches of astronauts who have said it and listened to the show. Strange. I'm going tomorrow to Space Rocks at the O2, and they all listen to the show.
Is that right?
Yeah. I've been in strange places where I run the app. I hate putting so much money in your pocket, but I run the app, and I'm wanting to send you a little snapshot of my front. What do you call it when you take a picture? I can't believe it.
Selfie?
No. When you take a capture of your screen to show you that there's nobody where I am.
Screenshot.
I can't believe I can't. This is going to be horrible when I talk about the film. Anyway, I want to take a screenshot to show that there's nobody there apart from me. And there's always somebody. There's always at least one person nearby wherever I am in the world. Mark, can I just say, I'm looking at a picture of you, and you wish you looked like this on this chair. Have you seen this picture?
I don't know which. Is it a picture taken from like 6th form in
There's
school?
There's not a line on your face. You're perfectly squared, 90 degrees square jaw, thick head of hair. I want to name your surgeon.
I came into the BBC the other week and I showed my pass, and it had never occurred to me. You never look at your own pass. The photograph of me on my BBC pass is a photograph taken when I worked at Radio 1 in the 1990s.
On a ship offshore.
Yeah, exactly. And it's literally just been the same on the system. And I showed it to one of the security guards who hadn't seen it before. And they literally looked at it, and then they looked at me, and then they just laughed for about 2 minutes.
That's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
I think you're a fine figure of a man from here.
Absolutely. And then Mark got that person fired instantly, because you know what?
Right.
It's all gone to his head.
Yeah. Look, anyway, we need to talk about Hotel Mumbai.
We should.
Not only because that's why you're here. You came with an entourage, by the way.
These are the people who have been pointing me in the right doors and in front of microphones for the last few days. I've been talking about Hotel Mumbai non-stop, and I love the film, so I'll be talking about it until they switch the mics off in London.
You're a very good ambassador for it. So, in fact, you're a very good ambassador for pretty much any show that you're on.
Well, it's difficult because the last couple of years I happen to have been in a run of things I think are rather good and I like. I don't quite know how to flag to the people listening or watching me on telly that some of the other times I think I'm in unutterable crap, and I'm trying to soft pedal it and say, look, see it if you want. Sometimes I think I'm in things, I'm lucky enough to be in things that are great. Hotel Mumbai is a magnificent film, and I've seen it all over the world with different audiences, and it's incredibly powerful. It's a real-life story that gives the lie, frankly, to the toxic nonsense and hatred getting spouted from the White House and other pulpits around the world about how much separates us, because it will describe the situation in a minute, but it is a story, a real-life story about how far more unites us than divides us, and it's needed.
So we'll get on to the broader significance in just a moment. So this takes us back to 2008. Just explain the situation that we find ourselves in at the start of the film.
Sure. Well, jihadist extremist groups sent 10 gunmen into Mumbai, and they really wreaked havoc in the city. And so they had no idea whether 1,000 people had invaded or what, because the whole place was going up in flames and bombs. They were slaughtering people in the train station, in various hotels and restaurants. And a lot of people, ironically, ran for safety to this extraordinary symbol of India's opulence and future and diversity, the Taj Palace Hotel, which is maybe one of the most beautiful buildings in India, and in which there were 1,000 guests, very, very wealthy Westerners and Easterners, and 500 staff, and into which 4 gunmen walked and locked the doors and started shooting and blowing people up. And the police initially went in and were rebuffed. They had kind of First World War rifles. And then for 3 days, no authorities went in to help them. There was just the staff and the guests to protect themselves, 1,500 of them, against these gunmen intent on killing them and making a spectacle for the world. And what's extraordinary is that after 3 days, when the security forces came and got them, 1,470 people were still alive. And it's a tribute really to the staff who saved people in the most heroic way. And it's a very rare thing to have a big action movie like this in which the heroes are the people without guns, mostly the people with brown skin, who in acts of quiet courage and kind of selfless heroism smuggled the guests out, came back in, smuggled them out again, hid them in the lift shafts, spoke to their relatives living in the slums, because most of them lived in the slums, who were watching the whole thing unfold on telly, and were steered around the hotel to stay away from the gunmen. And although tragically 31 people lost their life, the vast majority walked away, and it just beggars belief that they did it, and this is the story of how.
I want to play a clip in just a moment, but just before, when we get to your decision to being in this movie and our decision to watch it, it's obviously a very harrowing film.
It doesn't stint on the violence, that's for sure.
But the cameras look away, so we don't see, because 160 people die in the whole of the attack. So you need to have strong reasons for being in it. We need to have strong reasons for wanting to see it.
Absolutely
so what is
right.
the justification for this?
So, well, first of all, you should know that all of the families, all of the survivors and the families of the people who died were incredibly keen for the film to go ahead. They've seen it, lots of them. I've seen it with, for instance, the manager of the hotel whose wife and children were killed in the attack. He's incredibly proud this film's been made as a tribute to the staff who acted so magnificently. But the reason to see it is that ultimately, as brutal and unstinting as the violence is, by the way, at the behest of the people who were there, who didn't want it soft, sugar-coated at all, it's a message of hope. It's a message of optimism. Humankind, essentially, we are generous. We are selfless. Even the worst people, I play a pretty unpleasant guy, surprised themselves on the night and did extraordinary things. We're told that we'd scramble over each other in the event of a fire to get to the exit. Well, guess what? We don't. Guess what? There's far more. All these drawbridges that are being drawn up and the flames that are being found by politicians around the world to drive us away from each other. That's not what we're like. And that's not what this extraordinary example of generosity and heroism showed that night. That's the reason to see it.
Just before we play the clip, explain your character, Vasily.
So I play a git, an awful Russian oligarch. I'm an amalgamation of 2 people. I know exactly who they are and what they did that night. And the guy I'm playing is as unpleasant and vulgar as you could possibly hope to find. He's risen to the top in the post-Soviet era, and you don't do that by being nice. He's ruthless and selfish and self-serving, and we don't wish him well at the beginning of the film. But like numbers of the people in the hotel, he would have thought would have made straight for the exit door and knocked people out of the way. He does some interesting things during the course of the night, discovers things about himself that he didn't think he was capable of.
Okay, so here's a clip with Jason as Vasily, and Nazanin Boniardi as Zara, and Dev Patel as Arjun.
What the hell was that?
Stay down.
It's chaos out here, sir. We're doing all we can.
Have you sent the men in?
I'm sorry, what, man?
The rescue squad?
Yes, Mr. Oberoi. We sent in a squad hours ago, but most were killed.
Just before Mark comes in, the guy who directed it, Australian guy Anthony Maris, is his first movie.
I mean, yeah, you've seen it, have you?
Yes, of
It's
course.
a stunning debut.
Yes,
Let's
so-
put aside the content for a second. It beggars belief that this is his first film. It's a magnificent piece of
So you decided to do this. Did you think this guy hasn't directed a movie before?
Well, first thing that happened was I'd actually been away shooting a lot, and I decided not to work. I was going to go to walk the Machu Picchu trail with my kids because now they're teenagers. They would rather be under a box by the side of the motorway and spend any time with me. But at the time, they would go on holiday. And I blocked out the summer. And then I read this script. And it was at the time of the beginnings of the rise of the populism and the kind of nationalism and hatred that we hear all the time now on the news. And I thought, why am I an actor if I don't want to be part of stories that celebrate the best of humanity? So I dropped out the family holiday. I looked at his short. Anthony directed a short that was Oscar nominated called The Palace, which is brilliant. And I thought, well, he's got the skill to do a short. I don't know if he can take on a feature like this, but sometimes you've got to roll the dice. I had no idea that he would have the skill he had. I mean, you have to see it, if possible, on a big screen. I know it comes out. You can buy it at home on Sky and your telly as well, but I would recommend going to the theatre to see it. And I just thought, if not stories like this, then why do I bother being in the pretend business?
And did your family say, okay, we agree with
Well,
that?
here's the thing, and it sounds like a corny way to butt
bail
the
out of
story.
this family holiday we've been looking forward to for a long time.
They were upset, and they didn't go. And 2 years later, I went to watch it with my 2 daughters and my mother-in-law. And at the end, they turned around and said, "That's the best film you've ever been in, Dad. You did the right thing dropping out the holiday."
Mark?
Can you tell us something about, you said that the character that you play is an amalgamation of 2 characters, and you said, I know who each one of them is.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are some characters, some named characters who are actually representations of people who were there and did behave extraordinarily, heroically, notably the head chef. But in terms of the other characters that we meet, sort of the central group of characters, are they largely amalgams? And how does that work in terms of the relationship between a real life situation and a fictionalized version of a character? How does it work?
Well, the thing is, there are so many, anyone who remembers it from the time or does a little bit of digging on the internet will see there are so many hundreds of jaw-dropping stories of heroism. When we say heroism, we're not talking about Bruce Willis heroism. Everyone's terrified. No one grabs the gun. You know, the heroes are the ones who are making the quiet, selfless decisions here and not kicking the doors down. And I don't envy the task that the director and the John Collier's co-writer had, distilling it down to 4 or 5 stories. But everybody knew who they were based on, which incidents they were based on. They didn't all happen at the Taj because there were 12 sites that were attacked, although the main one, by the end of it, was at the Taj. And they had, for instance, the director had access not only to all the people who'd survived and the families of the dead, but also the transcript of the recordings of the controller talking to the gunmen. So stuff that you would think he'd made up is actually all verbatim, the gunmen talking to the controller in Pakistan. And so we knew who we were based on, what they'd done, where it had happened. But actually the job of an actor is to be in the situation, to be in the moment. And the job in a film like this, like with Black Hawk Down, I think, was to get your own ego out of the way, not do any kind of tricksy stuff, not do any stuff you'd see in a movie but wouldn't happen in real life, but to keep ourselves in a state of terrified fight or flight, not knowing if we're going to be rescued any second or dead any second, and let the story unfold and get out of the way, if possible, of the real life story. Does that make any sense? Is that answering the question?
No, absolutely. And if that's the case, what's the atmosphere like on set? Because when you're dealing with something which, I mean, as Simon suggested before, I mean, it is a horrifying event, and there are scenes in the film that are genuinely horrifying. Although I don't think that they're gratuitous, but it is, we get a real sense of unfolding horror. What's the atmosphere like on the set, day in, day out, and obviously, between shots? What's it like being on the set whilst you're dealing with something that's fairly recent and genuinely horrifying?
Well, look, first of all, I don't want to pretend for a second that we went through anything like what people went through on the day, but on those few days. But we kept ourselves imaginatively in a place of trauma, meaning that we didn't do the normal stuff on a set, which is banter and joke and mess around and play music. We stayed in a kind of, adrenalized state. Anthony had speakers around the set that would suddenly erupt with screams or bombs or sounds of bullets. And given that acting is imagination, tricking your imagination, we tricked it as best we could. And the consequence of that was something that's never happened to me in 30-odd years of acting, which is that every single night we all went out and had dinner together, even if we had 4 or 5 hours before we had to go back to work the next day, because we'd spent 14, 15, 16 hours, whatever it was, as far as possible being terrified. And our characters cope in different ways. I swagger through it, but it doesn't mean he's not scared. And it was, I remember doing Good, the film with Viggo Mortensen, and feeling like I owed it to the character I was playing and to the people who died in the Holocaust, not to have my normal social time on set. I like having fun on set. I like acting. It's a very collegiate atmosphere. And we all, without discussing it with each other, just didn't do that. We didn't break character. We'd never broke the mood for a split second. Even during lunch, we'd all sit quietly and eat. I hope it shows on the screen, because what we wanted to do was honour the people who performed these extraordinary things and lost their lives. But I have to ask you, Simon and Mark, if it's true, because I think it's true. I've seen it with audiences. Audiences, when I've seen it and done Q&As, always want to stay and talk. And lots of people who were there at the hotel, who relatives were at the hotel, want to stay and talk. But I think, as brutal as it is, it's a film ultimately that gives you hope. It's a film that's made to be optimistic. Because there's no point just recreating trauma. So who would ever want to go and see that? I think and hope people should want to go and see it, because they feel slightly better about mankind afterwards.
Yes.
But I don't know if you agree.
I mean, yes. I mean, you would never say that this is an uplifting film.
Right.
It's a truly terrifying and depressing film. Mainly I would say because we spend a lot of time with the terrorists. We see them shooting people as though they're nothing. Like they're at a fairground.
That's all from CCTV.
Sure. So it's like they absolutely don't care. So on that level, we're horrified. On the fact that it takes the authorities so long to do anything, we're horrified about that. But like you say, at the end, because we have found good people who do extraordinary things, you do leave the cinema thinking there's hope.
Yeah. Well, good. I think so. I'm so aware of the hundreds of stories that most people got out. The vast majority of people got out, and they got out because there were so many stories. You can only tell Devs and Anupams and these other stories on the screen. But, the kitchen staff put baking trays down them. I can't remember if I said that, as improvised bulletproof vests. And there were so many people, young people actually, that took charge of these moguls and captains of industry and hid them for 2 or 3 days and literally arranged toilets and water and all the rest of it in the dark. I have all that stuff in my head. I hope it comes across when you watch the film. I think it does.
Mark?
You said that one of the things about it was that those the instructions that we hear from the bull, who is basically instructing everyone, from long distance. You said those were based, or at least inspired by transcripts of those actual.
No, they're
calls.
verbatim. They're actually verbatim.
Okay.
I don't know if it every single, but pretty much, even especially down to that one scene, which we don't want to give away, that extraordinary scene with the young Muslim woman, which really happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that it is very important that in the midst of everything else that's going on, there is this sense of a wider force, even more cynical force manipulating. I think those phone calls are really, really chilling. I agree with you about the. Whenever you see something in which there are stories of genuine heroism, as you say, not Bruce Willis heroism, but genuine heroism, what it always leads you to do is to go away and read, as I did afterwards, to see how much. And it is those stories are extraordinary. The idea of staying behind to protect others
and going out and coming back in. They weren't doing it out of deference because they worked for the hotel. They were doing it because they thought it was the right thing to do. I don't know what I mean. It's great to go and have a great time in the cinema, and it's great to laugh. It's great to be in a kind of fantasy horror situation. But sometimes it's important to put down a marker in popular culture in the form of popular entertainment, because it's a thrilling, exciting film to watch people, hide their hands and scream and stuff. What's storytelling for if we can't engage with the most serious subjects of our day? I
think we should mention Dev Patel, who is who carries a lot of the film, and he puts in a fantastic performance. Very kind of understated.
Yeah. Well, nobody wanted to show off because what really happened is powerful enough. I think he's brilliant. He's got a magical, very sensitive human quality. And he didn't want to do hero acting because his actions are heroic. But he's got a phenomenal quality on screen. My wife saw it last night and went, "That Dev's fabulous, isn't he?" I said, "She is. He is." And he went, "He's really got something." I went, "Yeah." She went, "And he's kind of sexy." I went, "That'll do, actually. I think the 3 compliments, we can stop now."
Can I ask you about a couple of other things?
Anything you like.
Usman says, can you ask Jason about being announced as the voice of Soviet Superman in the animated film Red Sun? I can't wait for this to come out.
No, I don't know why you find that funny, Mark. You're laughing all the way.
Are you going to play this as...
Mark Miller, the genius comic book graphic novelist, had read a book called Superman Under the Red Sun about a Superman that landed in Soviet Union instead of landing in America. And it's a brilliant, much-loved graphic novel. It's been made into a brilliant DC animated movie. And yes, indeed... Those who snigger, I am playing.
Can you do him with a Yorkshire accent?
No, I suggested it. For some reason, they weren't that keen.
Really? I can't possibly.
I just want to be absolutely clear. I'm not sniggering. I am laughing affectionately.
Ian in Liverpool, can you ask Jason if he knows could he tell us about the cancellation of the OA, whether he believes there's a chance it might be saved?
There's a huge fan movement, which we are unbelievably touched by. They took a billboard out in Times Square. They got a blimp. They're doing the movements all over the world. One lady, unfortunately, went on hunger strike for a while, which is very disturbing. We persuaded her not to. I've no idea. I love that show. I'd love to do more. Keep working at it.
Jason, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
No!
Thank you very
Surely I
much.
don't have to go.
Well, you can stay and review films if you like.
That's
but
a very professionally suicidal idea.
You'll have to.
They're all brilliant, and I'd like to work with all those people, even the rubbish ones.